Hello and welcome. My name is Marva Ward. I'm the National Product Educator for the Now brand of supplements in Canada. And these brief discussions and PowerPoints that I'm conducting are designed to speak to evidence-based therapies that work to support in the recovery of numerous health issues. So today what we're going to talk about is amino acids and how we can use them to help as stress support formulas. Just a little bit of an overview of amino acids. There's 22 naturally occurring amino acids. 20 of them are called proteinogenic. They're part of the overall process of gene expression. They're all amino acids that we use, the foundation of our body, cells, etc. Essential and non-essential and conditionally essential amino acids. Within those 20, there's 9 essential amino acids and 11 non-essential. 9 essential amino acids are sourced from our food. The non-essential are synthesized in the body from the essential amino acids. They're the building blocks of the human body: protein, hormones, antioxidants, and neurotransmitters. And that's really what we're going to speak about and focus on today, specifically their activity as neurotransmitters. They're necessary for structural support, tissue growth, immune support, nerve transmission. L versus D forms. L and D forms of amino acids. The L forms are naturally occurring. These are what the body uses. It's what's found in the human body. The amino acids are named for the direction in which they move. For example, L, left. This is indicative of the fact that it is a naturally occurring amino acids. D forms move to the right. These are forms that are sold commercially. They're synthetic. They're not readily incorporated into the body, and typically you're not seeing them in health food stores. D forms. There's several amino acids that do not polarize, and therefore they're free of the L or the D prefix. Thinking about taurine or glycine. The human body, including the central nervous system, cannot function properly without amino acids. They really truly are the building blocks of and the foundation of life. Individual amino acids that are low or missing are going to affect the availability of all others, and they will also be proportionately reduced. An imbalance may lead to a state of disease, absolutely, and supplementing serves as the most profoundly effective therapeutic option. In my opinion, one of the fastest ways to recover is looking at the health issue and possibly marrying that with an amino acid that might help rebuild the body. And 9.5 times out of 10 you're going to find one, and that's specifically what we will speak about today, is using amino acids that help with stress related issues. So the 9 amino acids I spoke about that must be obtained through the diet: histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. I've given you a indication of the asterisks of the isoleucine, leucine, and valine. These are asterisked because they are utilized in the body a bit differently, which I'll speak about in a moment. Non-essential amino acids, we synthesize them through other essential amino acids and other nutrients. Alanine, arginine, asparagine, etc. And as you can see, glutamine, glycine, etc., the list, and the bottom 11, tyrosine. Now, I've given you some with a single asterisk, some with both a single and a double asterisk. The single asterisk represents conditionally essential. And what this means is that the body makes it, yes, but often we're not making enough to be able to maintain homeostasis or balance in the body. And so often supplementation is what we're looking at to bring these levels back up so that we can restore our health. If you see the double asterisk, it's simply an FYI that infants, these are essential in infants, and they must be provided by the infant formula or the mother's milk. there's a lot of nutrients that are called amino acids and referred to them, but they're actually precursors and hormones and neurotransmitters: SAMe, NAC, 5-HTP, GABA, theanine, L-ornithine, etc. I'm going to speak a lot about a few. I'm going to speak a lot about a few of these that are specific to helping with stress and stress modulators. The free-form amino acids, we certainly hear a lot of talk about, is this a free-form amino acids? Typically, any single amino acid on your supplement shelf that says L-arginine, L-glutamine, taurine, these are all free-form. They're not bound to any other amino acid. And if we think about eating protein, having a piece of protein or even a protein shake, all of the amino acids that are in that protein are bound to peptide bonds. In free form, they're not bound. They're quickly absorbed right into the bloodstream. We often take them without food to get the fastest reaction within the human body. Peptide bonded, as I mentioned, are all proteins that we're finding in our food. They need to be broken down, and you're typically taken with food because they typically are food. Branch chain amino acids, these are pretty remarkable, a remarkable set of nutrients. Unlike other amino acids, they are synthesized in muscle tissue. These are essential amino acids: leucine, isoleucine, and valine, and these are branch chain amino acids. Just to speak a little bit further about that, if we look at the way that protein is digested, it's taken into the stomach, starts to be broken down by hydrochloric acid, enters into the small intestine, and is ultimately broken down more by pancreatic juices and enzymes, and in the end, it passes, once it's broken down into macronutrients, it is then released into the micronutrients, released into the bloodstream, and it's sent to the liver, where the liver it creates other amino acids, but it is also like the distribution house, sending the amino acids to wherever it's needed in the body. The exception are branch chain amino acids. Once they leave the small intestine, they go directly to tissue to be synthesized, and this has a remarkable implications as far as healing is concerned, specifically for muscle wasting diseases. Coming from a manufacturing perspective, when we are manufacturing amino acids in supplement form, our typical sources for vegetarian would be 5-HTP, arginine, glutamine, histidine, lysine, methionine, ornithine, phenylalanine, proline, taurine, theanine, tryptophan, and valine. Our non-vegetarian sources can be arginine, branch chain amino acids, isoleucine and leucine, cysteine, N-acetylcysteine or NAC, and tyrosine. Now, if we look at NAC, NAC is not taken from an animal source per se as far as tissue is concerned, or dairy, but NAC is sourced from chicken feathers, and this is why it's said to be a non-vegetarian source. Our tyrosine, up until maybe about a year ago, was basically non-vegetarian because it was sourced from human hair, but it now is sourced from dairy, so it's certainly a vegetarian, although not a vegan. The extraction methods are something, again, that is often asked. How are you extracting? How are you creating? Or how are you getting these amino acids? Typically, fermentation is really the most prominent way of extraction process of an amino acid from a substrate. Enzymatic catalyst, extraction from natural sources, chemical synthesis, but as I say, primarily extraction is through Before we start talking about amino acids and how we can use them for stress, we need to look at what stress is and the stress response in the human body. We've certainly heard about the fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system, when all of our efforts, everything in the body is directed at running for our lives and saving our lives. What happens is it triggers epinephrine or adrenaline to be released from the adrenal medulla. And the adrenal medulla is the principal site for the conversion of tyrosine, amino acid tyrosine, to epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. This is really vital and important for the conversation that we're going to be having today. Another part of the adrenal glands, the adrenal cortex, is where we counteract the fight or flight response by releasing cortisol. Starts in the hypothalamus, travels to the pituitary gland, as I've mentioned here, releasing ACTH hormone. ACTH is released in the bloodstream, and this is when the adrenal cortex releases cortisol. Cortisol is released to try to regulate or resolve the reaction of adrenaline in the body. It increases the availability of body fuel. It supplies carbohydrates, fats, and glucose, which is needed to respond in stress. But the overproduction of cortisol is profoundly problematic, and with a number of different health issues, and is said to be the catalyst of numerous health issues, everything from diabetes to heart disease, etc. So what we're trying to do is ultimately stop the over release of cortisol or the ongoing release of cortisol. We live in a society where we are constantly under stress, where our adrenaline is constantly shooting through our bodies, and ultimately so is cortisol. So in order to try to regulate this, there are a number of different approaches we can take, and specifically today I'm going to speak about how we can use amino acids to help reduce this type of reaction in the human body and ultimately keep us in a much healthier state. Talking a little bit about stress and the neurobiological disorders, this HPA axis that I spoke about, I'm going to talk a little bit about that because that's really influential within the naturopathic community and how they're trying to resolve stress, different neurological disorders, mood disorders, and functional illnesses, because it's often all based on 1, stress, and 2, cortisol. So this HPA axis is involved in a number of different illnesses, everything, as you can see, from anxiety disorders, bipolar disorders, insomnia, ADHD, depression, irritable bowel syndrome, and the list goes on and on. When we look at this from an allopathic perspective, it's typically treated with antidepressants, but we're going to speak to a lot of other options that the individuals have. Regulating the HPA axis, there are several neurotransmitters are important in regulating HPA axis, particularly dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. Now, I think it's also important to note here, and I'm going to keep bringing this one up, is serotonin's importance in this. Dopamine and serotonin primarily, but serotonin receptors modulate the release of many hundreds of different types of neurotransmitters as well, and the HPA axis depresses it. Talking a little bit about oxytocin, simply again specific to serotonin, because serotonin modulates the release of oxytocin. And oxytocin is a peptide. It contains 9 amino acids, and it has multiple biological classifications within the body. It's both a hormone and a brain neurotransmitter, and it is an anti-anxiety, has an anti-anxiety effect, and this is why we release it. It promotes empathy and romance and love. And when we release oxytocin, we feel love and empathy and kindness and gratitude, etc. But again, and as I think it's the second last bullet here, it exerts multiple psychological effects. It influences our social behavior and our emotion. And serotonin is vital in modulating the release of oxytocin. Serotonin receptors influence various biological and neurological processes: anxiety, appetite, cognition, mood, nausea, sleep. And if we look at serotonin receptors that are targets of various drugs, typically the allopathic community, in order to support or to limit anxiety and aggression, etc., they give you antidepressant or antipsychotics, and the list goes on and on. The naturopathic community look at this dysregulation of the HPA axis in terms of being a syndrome called the general adaptive syndrome. So what the naturopathic community does is looks at an individual that may have all of these, many of these neurological disorders, everything from depression to anxiety, all of these, and what they're looking at it is that the syndrome is called GAS, or general adaptive syndrome. It's a result of chronic overstimulation of cortisol and basically adrenaline. And there's 3 phases, so the course of action is multifaceted in their protocol. There's 3 different phases based on where they believe that individual is as far as this syndrome is concerned. So what they're using is adaptogens, B vitamins, vitamin C, even amino acids, essential oils, lavender, lavandula augustifolia, because of the science behind it as well in helping reduce anxiety. But amino acids are a profound and very prominent aspect of this protocol, and really that's what I'm going to speak about tonight, as mentioned many times in this presentation. The abnormalities of the HPA axis, or this chronic stress response, have been most consistently demonstrated as biological markers in depressive illness. So this stress response really is the reason for depression. Elevated cortisol levels caused by stress lower serotonin, that's 5-HT, lower the serotonin function in the brain, and thus it leads to the manifestation of a depressive state. And this is this was taken from, as noted here, the British Journal of Psychiatry. Serotonin and dopamine levels affected by chronic stress response. Absolutely. Cortisol inhibits the production of serotonin and dopamine. And stress even inhibits the body's ability to utilize tryptophan from our food, an essential amino acid that ultimately is supposed to raise serotonin levels. The amino acids that I'm going to bring to the table today that really help with stress support would be arginine, glutamine, taurine, GABA, acetyl-L-carnitine, tyrosine, tryptophan, and 5-HTP. Arginine does a number of different things in the human body. It's a conditionally essential amino acid, and it does everything from regulating blood pressure through increasing nitric oxide production to stimulating the pituitary gland to secrete human growth hormone. It boosts the immune system by stimulating the thymus gland, but specific to stress, it aids in the metabolism of ammonia. Ammonia is a natural byproduct of the breakdown of protein, and Ultimately, what arginine does is ensure detoxification or the metabolism of ammonia. This has a number of different implications as far as our health is concerned, but specific to stress, it supports the sleep cycle. We have L-arginine in many different formulas: 500 milligram, 1,000 milligram, pure powder. If you're looking at L-arginine to lower blood pressure, all of the studies indicate that it's 3,000 milligrams 3 times per day on an empty stomach, and it will lower blood pressure as effectively as pharmaceuticals will. However, in this particular situation, you may only be using 1,000 milligrams of arginine, and you may be taking it before you go to bed. Glutamine, it is one of the most abundant amino acids, and it is, although it is in the 11 non-essential amino acids, because we use so much of it for so many different aspects of metabolism, that it is said to be a conditionally essential amino acid, because often we're caught short in not having enough to be able to keep us in a state of health. It's a staple for any type of tissue recovery, and it's vital for immunity. It is a prominent food source for good bacteria in the gut. Several studies show that during times of stress, physical and physiological and psychological stress, that ensuring proper amounts of glutamine would also ensure a much more the body's ability to recover much more quickly in those states. Low glutamine stores increase inflammation and free radical activity. They decrease our immunity, our gut health. They weaken the intestinal mucosa. Anxiety, they lower our ability to cope with anxiety, sleeplessness, lack of concentration. And glutamine increases the production of GABA. GABA, which is our one of the most prominent non-inhibitory neurotransmitters. All of these 4 points that I've made are specific to stress as well. It supporting immune system, decreasing inflammation, and helping with sleep and anxiety and concentration, and of course helping with the production of GABA. Glutamine, again, dependent on how much you're using, and in this case it may only be 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams per day, just to ensure that you have enough in the body and that you aren't falling short of stores. So we have 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams in capsules, 1,500 milligrams in tablets, and also in pure powder. Taurine, you can't speak about anxiety and stress without including taurine. Multiple mechanisms of action, and it works in multiple ways in the human body. It is found freely in our nerve cells and tissues. It stabilizes cell membranes in both the brain and the heart. It is a key modulator and support of GABA, the efficacy function of GABA. It modulates this neurotransmitting activity of GABA. Without taurine, GABA cannot fire and work properly. Taurine generates nerve impulses by aiding the movement of potassium, sodium, calcium, and magnesium in and out of the cells. So this helps with brain firing of neurotransmitters, the function within the brain cells, but also very, very supportive for heart function as well. It protects against oxidative stress, and it is important in the formation of bile salts, again helping with digestion. When we're under stress, digestion is one of the first things to go as well, and again supporting digestion simply through helping with the production of bile. Taurine is available in many different sizes and potencies as well. 500 milligram capsules, 1,000 milligram capsules, and then also in pure powder. You're looking at an effective dose of effective dosing of taurine per day would be anywhere between 1 and 3,000 milligrams per day to really get optimal use of taurine. GABA is a non-essential amino acid, and it's found mainly in the human brain and in the eyes. It's synthesized from glutamic acid in the presence of B6. GABA cannot be created without B6. It's a major inhibitory neurotransmitter in the human brain, so it really regulates our brain and nerve cell activity. It inhibits the number of neurons that fire so that we feel relaxed and we aren't stimulated or overstimulated by stress. We remain calm. And it's a benzodiazepine, GABA is, and Valium is as well. But just showing you how it equates to some pharmaceuticals. GABA is often used by bodybuilders because of the fact that it stimulates human growth hormone production. And if you recall, I talked about arginine does that as well. Both of them are used for athletes often use them prior to going to bed, simply because human growth hormone production typically takes place at around 2 in the morning for individuals who are producing it, if they're at the age that they are producing it. And having specific amino acids supporting it helps with human growth hormone production, ultimately helping with really the entire body and regulation of many mechanisms in the body. Our GABA, we have in multiple forms. I love our chewable. The chewable GABA at 250 milligrams, it's not necessarily high doses of GABA, but what's important about this formula, that it also contains inositol, theanine, and taurine, all of which support the utilization, production, and efficacy of GABA. Acetyl L-carnitine is an ester of the trimethylated amino acid L-carnitine. L-carnitine is used throughout the whole body, typically for the production of energy, ATP. But L-carnitine can't cross the blood-brain barrier, where acetyl L-carnitine can. So ultimately, it is used for brain function activity, liver and kidney, and also for cardiovascular. Well, carnitine certainly is anyway. Acetyl L-carnitine is highly bioavailable, and because it crosses the blood-brain barrier, everything that L-carnitine does in the human body, cardiovascular and liver, acetyl L-carnitine will do in the brain. Profound antioxidant, helps to maintain cellular energy, and supports brain function by supporting ATP production within the cells of the brain. Studies indicate that it may have an inhibitory effect on the body's stress response. And I talked about the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis. And studies indicate that it can regulate cortisol. It can decrease the activity of the HPA axis, ultimately by lowering cortisol levels and consequently improving mood. If we think about cortisol again, lowering the body's activity to utilize serotonin or even create serotonin ultimately, and other neurotransmitters, then it ultimately is acetyl L-carnitine is very effective at inhibiting this HPA axis activity. It has almost an acetylcholine-like action in affecting serotonin synapses. Acetylcholine is a primary nutritive used in the brain as well for serotoninogenic activity. It has been found to be very effective in supporting mood regulation, and I've given you 2 URLs that support this as well. The URLs are from PubMed, and they're studies and research papers that speak to acetyl L-carnitine's effect on mood regulation. Tyrosine is really one of the ultimate amino acids that contribute to mood, to a healthy mood. Phenylalanine is the precursor to tyrosine, is the essential amino acid. But tyrosine is the precursor to dopamine. And this is very, very important. So we need serotonin and we need dopamine desperately, because both of them regulate so many other hundreds of other neurotransmitting activity. So tyrosine, being a precursor to dopamine, taken in as minimum as 500 milligrams per day, is going to raise dopamine levels and other catecholamines like norepinephrine. Epinephrine is vital. You want to maintain proper levels of adrenaline, and so that you don't develop adrenal fatigue and the ability to not create adrenaline simply because of the nutritive status of the body, and also too much stress, an overactive stress response. Tyrosine is also vital for the thyroid hormones T4 and T3. It is used in controlling anxiety simply because of its effect as a precursor to dopamine. It's also an antioxidant in a sense that it is the precursor to the formation of CoQ10, and coenzyme Q10 is one of our biggest antioxidants that we create in the human body. Tyrosine at 500 milligrams is 60 and 120 caps. As mentioned, it could easily be as little as 500 milligrams that's required, and typically no more than 2,000 milligrams per day is recommended. So serotonin and dopamine are the two main neurotransmitters that affect our mood, and I've said this numerous times in this presentation. They also regulate a number of other things: our appetite, libido, circulatory system. They are master neurotransmitters. They control nearly all other 180 neurotransmitters, the production and utilization. Of course, then it is certainly understandable that if we're deficient in serotonin and dopamine, it ultimately creates an imbalance in all other neurotransmitters. The multiple implications, I think we know, result in numerous disturbances in mood, cognitive function, neurological disorders. Pharmaceutical interventions, or SSRIs, or serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or dopamine drugs that support the production of dopamine, such as benzodiazepines. But there's problems with these pharmaceuticals. How serotonin works in the brain is that small amounts are released. Serotonin stimulates other cells through electrical charges, and once it's done its job, it's reabsorbed back into the original cell. This direct effect is to hit this target cell beside it again and again to cause sufficient electrical charges that change or affect our mood. Now, what an SSRI does is it takes our natural serotonin and it blocks this reuptake, so it doesn't go back into the cell. It stays outside of the cell longer. It gives it more time to do its job, hitting the neighboring cell repeatedly to cause it to fire, and ultimately we feel good when that happens. The problem is that enzymes within the brain eventually break down the serotonin over time. It depletes the body's ability to make serotonin. The brain becomes depleted, so depleted that SSRI drugs do not work any longer. And ultimately we are profoundly depleted in serotonin. What does the pharmaceutical company do? They turn to dopamine drugs. And these are ultimately antipsychotic drugs. And they ultimately result in the same problem. We become depleted in dopamine. So now you have an individual that it's depleted in both serotonin and dopamine. And that is a tragic state to be in. So we're going to speak about some amino acids that can be, in some cases, equally as effective. First one for serotonin support is 5-HTP. If we think about the process with which we make serotonin, typically starts with tryptophan, converts to 5-HTP, which ultimately converts to serotonin. 5-HTP has really been the go-to amino acid to help support serotonin production because it's such a natural way with which the body will work its wonders by creating more serotonin. It's also a vegetarian source. It's extracted from the African plant Griffonia simplicifolia. As I'd mentioned, it is the intermediate metabolite between tryptophan and serotonin. It helps with creating more serotonin, which ultimately presents to us a positive mood. Natural serotonin support, helping with depression, anxiety, weight loss, and stress. The reason I say weight loss is because many individuals who are even just slightly low in serotonin look to often carbohydrates or binging with food as their source of stimulant to help with their moderate or very mild levels of possible depression. And so when small amounts of 5-HTP have been given to these individuals, 50 milligrams 3 times per day, their desire to eat stops because they no longer feel sad or anxious. Stress, of course, it helps reduce stress, absolutely, because it raises serotonin levels. Easily crosses the blood-brain barrier. Now has probably the most comprehensive selection of 5-HTP. 50 milligrams in capsules, 100 milligrams in V-caps, 100 milligrams in chewable, and we also have a 200 milligram that also contains tyrosine that really is a heavy hitter as far as 5-HTP is concerned. Often you're seeing on labels, take 5-HTP, 1 capsule 3 times per day. It's because 5-HTP after 4 hours has left the body. Now, here is our high potency at 200 milligrams and also includes tyrosine, B3, and B6. As I'd mentioned, B6 is very much a precursor and needed for the conversion and utilization of many amino acids, and ultimately we've included it in this formula. Tyrosine as well. So you're looking at raising dopamine and serotonin levels with this particular formula. Tryptophan. Tryptophan is also a pharmaceutical, and so within the natural health community, we are limited to the milligrams that we're allowed to have in a particular supplement, and I'm going to speak more about that in a moment. Tryptophan is an essential amino acid. It regulates mood and stress response because it is a precursor to serotonin. Ultimately, serotonin, I must say, converts to melatonin, which allows us to sleep. It also plays a key role in our sleep-wake cycle, etc. There's a few things that make this conversion impossible for us as humans. And one of them is this enzymatic mechanism called tryptophan hydroxylase, which is the enzyme that converts tryptophan to 5-HTP. This particular enzyme is inhibited by stress, insulin resistant, aging, deficiencies in B6, and deficiencies in magnesium. And I would say that 8 people out of 10 have some issue. If we cannot create this particular enzyme, for example, if we're stressed out, that means it's going to affect the levels of serotonin that we're able to create. But I think what's also really important to note is that tryptophan in the human body is first used to make B3 and then a niacin, and ultimately after that it's then used for other mechanisms or other metabolic functions, such as the production of serotonin. Tryptophan is also loses out in the competitive edge. Many amino acids compete with absorption. Tyrosine, leucine, isoleucine, valine, and phenylalanine all seem to beat tryptophan in the absorption aspect. So this is another way with which we can become deficient in tryptophan. Now, as mentioned, Health Canada regulates the amount of milligrams that we're allowed to recommend and put in a capsule. 220 milligrams is the highest amount that we're allowed to recommend as a daily dose. But just as an FYI, in order for tryptophan to work, you require 500 milligrams of tryptophan for every 50 pounds of body weight for it to be effective in raising serotonin levels to satisfactory levels. Just a little bit of a heads up on some of the supportive nutrients that help amino acids work more efficiently as supporters of dopamine and serotonin. Vitamin C is required as a cofactor for the conversion of 5-HTP to serotonin, but it's also required for the conversion of tyrosine to dopamine and dopamine to norepinephrine. It also prevents 5-HTP from converting to serotonin in the GI tract because we have more serotonin that is used in the GI tract often than that's used in the brain. And so to prevent the conversion in the gut, vitamin C stops 5-HTP from converting in the gut. It will ultimately go to the brain and convert in the brain. Magnesium plays multiple complex biological roles. It's vital for ATP production. It regulates a lot of activity and is a cofactor in many aspects, and so is highly recommended. B12, folic acid, and B6. Certainly B6 is a cofactor in the production of many amino acids. All of them play a key role in the methionine and methylation pathway and is highly recommended in helping again with stress-related issues. Some of the products that we have, as I'd mentioned, 5-HTP, tryptophan, tyrosine, etc. And of course, we have numerous retail support tools in the form of displays and posters, op-ads, amino acid brochures. Any of the documentation and on the amino acid brochures is based on our NPN claims. The last thing I'd like to remind you about is our Now Productology. This is exclusive to retailers, and it is a division of Now University. These are 60-minute training sessions that are on a variety of different health topics, everything from amino acids to xylitol, and they provide you with a tremendous amount of information that will be usable in your stores. To the right, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the registration URL is the top URL. The bottom URL is ongoing access to the courses. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. Have a wonderful day.